And welcome everyone to the Shitlord Preachers podcast. This is episode 44.
Yes.
Welcome back, Brook.
Welcome back, Amos. Where the hell have you been, my boy?
Where hell we been?
That's a good question. That's a very good question.
Thank you everyone for joining us today. If you're joining us for the first time, Shitlord Preachers podcast is where my friend Brook Potter and myself, both former preachers, now reformed shitlords, basically we get on the show and we talk about politics, social issues, cultural issues, and everything in between. If you haven't noticed, we have been gone since February.
Yeah,
February. Yeah. So we've been off the air for about a month and a week, I'd say. So 5 weeks ish. So yeah. What the hell have we been doing, man?
Do you want to fill in the month and a week?
All right, we're gonna do all the news. I'm just kidding. So yeah, we've been gone since pretty much our little show with Kirk, which actually, if you guys do want to check out Kirk Magoo's podcast and stuff, Brook's episode went up about a week ago, and in our episode that we did with him, he reposted onto his platforms that he does his podcast with. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, his podcast is the Independent Thought and Freedom.
Yep, check it out on iTunes and pretty much any real podcasting platform, you should be able to find it. But yeah, we have been gone for a lot of different reasons. One of which is I got a new job.
Yes, Amos, you've got a new job.
I did. So I got a new job.
Why would that keep you away from the podcast? The listeners want to know.
They want to know. So I have a new job that involves traveling. And part of traveling is you can't really just uproot your entire audio and video setup like I have here and just go wherever. I basically, part of my job, not to obviously give away exactly what I do, but it involves traveling, and I can work in different parts of the country for somewhere between 2 to 3 weeks at a time. And while I'm at these other places, I stay at hotels. What am I going to do? Bring all this equipment and set it up in the office area for the hotels they have? No. So part of the goal in the future will be basically put out content when we can, as well as have my equipment. But also in the future, I would hope I can get some sort of a laptop that I could basically pack all this with me, do this in hotel rooms. So that is definitely a work in progress. If also part of that too, we do have a subscribe star and a Patreon if anyone is interested in supporting the show. That will definitely go towards helping with basically recouping the costs that Brook and myself have both put into setting up the show, as well as buying our setups, and just for the time that we put into putting into the shows. We know we've gotten a lot of subscribers in the last couple months here, and it's definitely growing still. So what's been going on with you, Brook?
Oh, I mean, that's good. I'd just like to add to that. People wondering, we're not making any money off of this podcast, right? Nope. We've definitely put out a decent amount, especially for the rigs and other things like that. So yeah, anything that people might want to support the work and so forth, we're definitely open to that. But we don't got any sponsorships. We don't got any deals, at least not yet.
Not yet.
Right? We're going for Joe Rogan, man. He's number one. So exactly. we got a long way to go. But yeah, I know you've had your job. I've also been, I've kind of dependent on you for that. I did manage to get a couple of videos out on my personal channel, and I did cross the 1,000 subscriber required for monetization. Yes. Yeah, it happened right
at 1,170 as of now, right?
Yeah, as of the month has gone on, right after the Magoo interview, I hit my target of 1,000. It took about 3 weeks after that before the monetization kicked in. But now you got to maintain it, right? You got to keep the watch hours up. You got to keep, the content going. And I've missed about a couple weeks at least. So the work isn't done. But yeah, in terms of, I've been waiting on you for the timing, and both of us recently made a couple trips. So I mean,
trips.
yeah, well, you made a trip and I made a trip. So we could touch on that because it does involve some of our good friends over at Hapa Supremacy. So maybe you might want to touch on that.
So if anyone's been, people who've been keeping up, definitely noticed that our friends Hapa Supremacy, Shane and Nico, we're going to get married, and I was going to preside over the ceremony, and that just happened about last week, 2 weeks ago. So I had a nice little fun trip where I started off my job where I went to Nebraska, then came home, slept in my home for a day, then went all the way back out to Georgia and stayed there until a certain day, then flew back because I had to go to the wedding, was home for a couple days. Then I went out down to Texas and met up with Shane and Nico, as well as some people who maybe notice on YouTube. We have Crystal and Lucas, which they're actually Crystal does it's called the Fighting the Void live stream. They have a channel that they do, and then of course I met Shane and Nico, and we did their wedding, which was pretty fun. There was all 16 of us.
Nice and intimate.
Oh yeah, very. So yeah, it was I hung out with them pretty much the day before the wedding. We all went out, got drinks and a little bit like a later kind of a snack thing, hung out. The next day, had the wedding. And then after the wedding, there was a place we went to kind of have kind of like a pseudo reception. And then afterwards, I met up with Shane and Nico at this sort of an arcade. And then the day after, I think it was then 2 days after that, which was actually the night before I flew back to Minnesota, I had dinner with Shane and Nico once more, had a little talk with them just to kind of hang out. And then that was that. So
I think you're missing you're missing two very big parts of that story. First of all, get to your role in the said nuptials. What was your role in this?
I said I presided over the ceremony.
Yeah, so I mean, you did something very personal in terms of preparing your so there actually was some work that went into this whole thing.
Oh yeah, I mean, I know. Here I am downplaying myself.
And everybody apparently really loved it. So,
yeah. I mean, so part of what I do, I mean, I can't say exactly like word for word what all said. Some people know, some people don't know, but so part of what I've been doing, I've kind of realized like this will be kind of my thing if I do weddings. Is I tell a little story and kind of about the couple, like their individual stories, and then kind of how they meet. I think Shane and Nico they're not sure yet, but there's definitely talk that they might, because the ceremony was recorded, so they're wondering if they're thinking maybe they'll have to edit it, obviously for privacy concerns and such. But they will put it up so that people could kind of see what happened. Everyone is definitely very curious. The day of the wedding, a lot of people were tweeting at Shane and Nico, kind of like, "What's going on?" Like, because the whole wedding was 15 minutes.
The actual service, yes.
The actual ceremony was 15 minutes because it was just Shane and Nico and myself in terms of who was actually doing anything with the wedding. There was no bridesmaids, groomsmen, just the minister and the two of us.
So you didn't hook up with any hot bridesmaids, man?
No. So
that brings us to the other part of the story. We'll get to
that. Yeah, there was a +1.
There was a +1. We'll just call her not redhead for privacy reasons.
Yeah.
Because I mean,
So
there are some pictures of you with this said not redhead out there. We don't want to give away too much for our listeners, but there was a +1 for you.
yeah, it was a friend that came along,
What
and
kind of friend?
just a friend.
Oh man, okay. That sounds
Especially
juicy.
yeah, especially with everything kind of went down with the whole trip, and maybe less than that at this point, a lot less than that.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear
Um,
that.
but
I mean, you did look
uh,
good in the pictures, man. At least you got that
yeah,
in there.
yeah. But yeah, so yeah, it went really well. They really liked what kind of me presiding over the ceremony. Um, I mean, excuse me. One of the things I think a lot of people tend to misunderstand, especially with just me and just I think a lot of guys in general is like, so when it comes to what you and I have talked about with the red pill,
Yes.
kind of this more in-depth sort of understanding of intersexual dynamics, or just the dynamics between men and women, whether that's through dating or relationships, understanding how men behave, women behave, what has society done, social norms that have changed over the years and such. It can get kind of some people can kind of get an idea that someone like myself tends to be very pessimistic, and
You
sometimes
hate
view
women? Is that what you're saying?
exactly.
You hate
uh
women, Amos.
I
Thank
know.
God you came out of the closet.
Yeah, I mean, the idea gets around that people that believe in such things or talk about such things, anytime you're talking about like marriage statistics, feminism, the family law, all these things that are basically, or men's rights activism. Not that I am a men's rights activist, but men's rights activism, like talking about the disparities and just the laws in general, how double standards, and how let's say how you treat rape accusations or whatever, all these different things that a lot of people are pretty aware of, but no one really like kind of gets like, most men are kind of like, that's just how it is. I but So when talking about this, people, oh, you think you hate women, you never want to get married, you're just a lonely guy in his mom's basement, whatever, or you're just some lonely loser of a guy, whatever. There's a kind of a thought process, there's a mindset that's sort of pinned to that. And when I was doing this wedding, um, part of what I did, I mean, obviously it's a serious thing. A lot of people can do weddings, like ministers will just do a wedding, just reading words, doing a thing. It's a job kind of thing.
Right.
Um, excuse me. And it's for Shane and Nico, I consider them friends. And this was just for me, like a gift to them. So, to be full disclosure, I wanted to go to the wedding and I had a skill I could offer. So I figured
And it
it's
paid
a way,
off.
yeah, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's a nice thing to do. But part of reading the story and also sort of saying the words, because part of it you're kind of explaining to them, you're kind of setting out like, this is marriage, there's commitment, there's love, there's all this stuff. So there's still very much what some among red pill men might consider very blue pill or beta feelings and such, this sort of love and commitment, and also just for me actually presiding over a union. Some guys have their different feelings about marriage. There are some men that will be red pill, but also really actually still cling onto the idea of wanting to get married and have kids, which I consider myself one of those. I still see as love, commitment, and marriage are still very real, very sacred things to pursue in life. I think I see them as good things. Some guys have just been so, I feel, indulged into these conversations with red pill men that they just think, they're further out from ever considering wanting to get married. And for good reason for some people. I think people are, definitely entitled to do whatever they want to do. But um, I felt this was just something where I really got to like kind of show like I can still see the that marriage is definitely a very risky thing for men. Marriage is definitely, um, unfortunately, for a lot of men, it is a very it can be, the divorce. And I'm not saying anything about Shane and Nico's. Like they're in my talks with them, which just between them and me, in the conversations, and also just talking to other people they've talked to, they went through what's called like premarital counseling. So they did a lot of preparation. Um, there are a lot of very good things that I liked, that I think is really good for them,
Mm-hmm.
and I have no concerns in that way. But in a lot of other people that I've talked to in the past, you see red flags and whatever. Um, and through my time, talking to other men involved in the red pill community, reading materials and stuff, you find all sorts of things, and people can very easily just kind of get caught up in sort of the impractical side of marriage. Just it's all love and just no preparation, and love is supposed to conquer all. And maybe, but a lot of times not really, fortunately. So
I mean, it's a tough spot, especially with our interactions with people in the red pill community. Um, and I think there is a need for caution, definitely, in terms of understanding female nature, in terms of understand men must understand the risks. So yes, while 50% of marriages end in divorce, that means that 50% don't. Right? There's still at least half that actually kind of make
mhm.
it and stuff like that. Right? So um, it is a tough position, especially for me. Like I'm with you. I would still like to get married. I'm not married, don't have kids. I'm getting up there. I'm going to be hitting 40 in a couple of years. So yeah, that's something I'd probably like to get under my belt sooner rather than later. But you can't force these things. But yeah, I'm still optimistic about that. And there are a lot of men in the red pill community who are just like, oh no, that's stupid. You're crazy. Um, and I fully get it. I fully get it. But I think a lot of it has to do with how well you vet your partner. There's a very good book out, The Tactical Guide to Women. I think
Mhm.
it's Dr. Sean something. I can't remember the last name.
Dr. Sean T. Smith.
That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got his book. I've gone through it a few times. And he was the one who kind of really brought balance to me in terms of the red pill knowledge. So he was definitely on board with the guys, Richard Cooper, Rollo Tomasi, and that whole crew. He spoke at the 21 convention, but he was not necessarily as dogmatic as some of the other speakers. He was still kind of open to, yes, relationships can happen, marriages can happen, but it takes preparation. It takes knowledge, foresight, know what to look for. As you say, the red flags is a big one. And yeah, the major reason a lot of these things fail is because men are not educated on what it actually takes in terms of a partner. They get their first their first taste of vagina, and they're cashing in their chips, right? This like game over. The first woman they sleep with, that kind of whole thing.
I mean, it's such a the feels, so to speak.
The feel. And there's nothing wrong with the feels as long as you don't let it overpower you in terms of everything else.
Yeah, I mean, guys, let's just say halfway inside a girl, and the next thing you know, and I love you. What? uh,
Yeah, pretty much. Tell us a little bit about this not redhead.
um,
Because I mean,
it's
it's all over the internet, right? So you have
just
it on social
pictures.
media. It's not a
Um,
secret, right?
so well, before I started at the beginning, the end was basically cut off. I mean, just probably not going to talk to this person at
Yeah,
all
yeah. You
anymore.
didn't need to get into all that, but
Eh, eh, eh. Um, But yeah, I mean, this is someone that I've known a while, never met in person. Kind of just one of those things, you have internet friends. Met for the first time, we hung out, and it went really well, for the most part. Just and then and then there was the wedding and such, and then just yeah,
Just kind of
then
drift apart.
kind of drifted. Yeah, we'll say that. So, um, yeah. Kind of one of those first times I really got in a while, really got to sort of, um, get a feel for what it's like. Again, spending a good amount of time with a woman, kind of thing.
Right.
So, really seeing how I feel about just not just this person, but just also like being with a woman in general. How
Yeah,
I
sharing
am
your time and
sharing my time and seeing how I am.
yes,
With with the uh post well yeah way post breakup nasty breakup that I had years ago, and kind of also post kind of learning a lot of red pill, and also and just where I was, um mentally and emotionally, how I was, what was going through my mind, how was I responding to things, how was I communicating with this person, stuff like that. A lot of things that Brooke and I talked about, and I talked about with a lot of guys, and kind of got it. So I'd say it's a very valuable thing. um
I
at the
mean,
same time,
in your
go ahead.
defense, right? Because I kind of have a bit of an inside track on this thing. In your defense, I really think you were too much man for her. I think you were a little too alpha, and she just didn't know what to do. Would you say that that's a fair assessment?
Definitely. So
Good.
um which isn't necessarily bad.
No, we're not everybody's cup of tea, as
Yeah, so so if anyone who's like watches like red pill content, who knows, kind of, so people know about Rollo Tomasi, Richard Cooper, some of these guys,
Donovan and Jack.
Donovan Sharp.
Yeah.
One of the guys I tend to kind of, I guess I would identify with is Ryan Stone, and
No
he's
homo.
excuse me. And part of what he talks about when he talks about like sort of communicating and dealing with women is you never want to go too alpha. Um, you want to, especially with any sort of, because you have your short-term relationships, you have your long-term, but in cases where you're spending any time with someone more than just like a one date kind of thing, um, you have your alpha, obviously, but you allow a little bit of what he calls beta or blue pill or comfort, basically. You want to kind of dial back just for that comfort, because full blown alpha is, can get, not like physically, but just it can get, just in terms of the dynamic, it's too direct. It can get too violent, so to speak. And I'm not saying violent in any physical or any way by that chance. It's just you come on too strong. So basically,
Yes.
in flexing your,
Your
your alpha.
bravado.
Exactly. Yeah. You're kind of, yeah.
Yeah,
We'll
yeah.
just
So
say,
so with not a redhead, she's a good Christian girl, would you say? Would you say she's, a woman of faith, probably closer to traditional values sort of thing?
relatively speaking, yes.
Relatively speaking, of course, because it's all relative, isn't it? But the point I was making on that is, as both Amos and myself do come from a Christian background, and definitely there's a huge push of feminization within the church towards men.
Hmm.
And I suspect, right, this is just a hunch, I don't know Not a Redhead very well, but I suspect she kind of expected you to be more of the docile church going type guy who's kind of,
Yeah.
I think because you had very good banter, from what you described online, and I think she expected you when you got there to kind of give her the reins, as most Christian men tend to do. They think it's all about pleasing, the woman.
Yeah, there were definitely spots where it was very much an expectation that I would sort of basically placate.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'll say this. So part of anyone whoever associates with me in any way, whether it's through friendship or through some sort of romantic involvement, just all relationships of all kinds, we'll say.
Yes.
Anyone is coming close and wants to have any sort of connection. I've realized that, I'm not going to compromise much, if any, of myself nowadays. There are people that are definitely friends with me who were kind of friends with me before a lot of things happened to me. So there's definitely exceptions or certain changes that happen there. Because one of the things that I had noticed was just kind of being myself. I wasn't going to obviously, like I said, placate. People aren't people that want to hang out with me, people that I spend my time with. I'm not going to people they can't I don't like people who take themselves too seriously. I don't like people who maybe are a little too um I guess, how would I say it? Yeah, who take themselves too seriously, can get too sensitive about certain things, and who don't have a good sense of humor, as I see it.
Correct.
Um, I mean, knowing knowing us, we call ourselves shitlords. We're obviously going to talk, joke about, a little bit, just pretty intense types of humor, whether it's dark humor, direct, just very harsher types of humor that some people might just, not that they're like, offended, like some lefties, triggered, but it's just a little more like closer.
Edgy. Yeah.
Yeah, edgy. There we go. That's the word I was looking for. So if people, if I come along with someone, you know, um, I think, I have, you and I both have our more gentler, sort of gracious side. Like as we have our Christian background and the things we used to preach, we still can, like, we want to, like, kind of be nice, so to speak.
Sure.
But the change now is, if someone comes along and, I kind of, we'll just say, throw out a volley of
Right.
jokes and jabs. Nothing ever insulting, nothing ever mean. And if you can make it past that, if you can kind of, roll with that real easily and just understand that I'm not, super serious, um, I will then respond accordingly. I will just, oh, okay, cool. Now you get the me, the me I want to be versus the me I feel I have to be, to kind of vet not only not only people who I might want to consider something more than friends, but also friends as well. Any sort of real relationship or connection.
Correct. Correct.
Brooke and I will joke back and forth and get real edgy. And if at any point, granted, if we've known each other long enough that things are a little bit different, but someone else comes along, you start to see, like, if they're gonna just get too sensitive about certain things, and and I feel, okay, whether it's reasonable or unreasonable, then I might go, oh, okay, well, maybe not gonna be as close.
I think it's safe to say, based on just I mean, not that I know everything, but not a redhead tends to be a little more on the sensitive side.
Yeah.
And from what you've described to me, she was not ready for the likes of you. Right? So,
Yeah,
but that's good. That's good.
So that's just telling me that anything beyond really what we had as just, online friends is just not really feasible.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that.
So,
Better to know, right? Better to know.
Better to know.
Yeah,
and that
exactly.
was the thing. That was the whole sort of experience was it's better that I know and I kind of, I'd rather come too strong and it not work than come too soft and kind of be in the iffy area.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think there's a phrase we used to use back in the pickup artist days where you pull a Latin lover, and this comes from like the Telemundo type like soap operas where you just go all in crazy, right? Like you try to blow it up in a sense, that overbearing kind of thing. And the reason you do that is because when especially when women are confronted with that level of strength or passion, I mean, the kind of Don Juan, that kind of thing, they're forced to make a choice really quick as to whether they're going to accept it or not. So it tends to cut through bullshit really fast, and you know what you're dealing with immediately. Now, I don't think you didn't do that intentionally, but again, the level of game that you were probably playing, even for her, it probably came across that way. But it was a good experience. I mean, you did get some good pictures, and you had company out there, which was great. And I mean, what did you do for the rest of the trip? Because you were out there for a couple of days.
Did a little exploring of the area. Yeah, I mean, I honestly just liked just kind of doing a lot of looking around, did a lot of driving around, checking out the area because I was in the Frisco area. So Frisco is just north of the Dallas Fort Worth area. And I think, yeah, and I used to live in Plano, which was like the next town over back in 2011 when I was in ministry in the area, lived there.
You didn't go and visit any.
Nope,
Nope. Okay.
didn't visit them.
Might be
Um,
a good thing.
yeah, I mean, it just if it sounded good in my mind at one point, and I thought, no. Um, yeah, I did a lot of driving around. I kind of did my full round of trying all the different restaurants that they don't have up here in Minnesota, which was nice. Um, yeah, I mean, didn't do too much beyond that. Definitely have some thoughts for the future. Maybe sometime, like, maybe I do want to move there sometime in the future, just because no income tax, which is nice. No state income tax.
Yeah.
Freaking guns everywhere. And one thing I do like, so what I do like about Texas, some people were noticing is like they were saying, yeah, why is like all the buildings, like everything looks so new, it looks so clean, like there's always something being built in the area.
Mhm.
And I said, yeah, I mean they don't have any income tax, and that's probably just a lot looser in general in terms of more things are privatized. You
Right.
just you have it's economically speaking, it's a lot better off than a lot of parts of the state. Um, and I think just the whole Texas attitude in general is very independent. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, it is the Republic of Texas. Like they literally count themselves as
well,
an independent country.
Texas was a country, yeah.
Yeah, it
Um,
was. It was. It
it,
went all the way
like
up to Montana at one point.
yeah, I mean, you look at it in terms of just so all of the states in the U.S. were either acquisitions like well, Alaska, Hawaii, the Louisiana Purchase, other pieces of land that were discovered and sort of brought in, but there were always territories.
Mhm.
Um, Texas was a country to itself for a while. Now, I've said this before, and I don't know if there's if it's actually true, but I've heard a few people confirm it. Every year, the state of Texas votes whether or not to stay in the union.
Oh, really? A secession movement?
No, it's just a vote from their state legislature to like, are we staying in this year? Yeah, okay.
Right. Interesting. I don't know if that would be, listeners, let us know if that's true or not. That would be really interesting.
But yeah, so there's that. But yeah, I mean, you will never find a state more proud of itself. You will not. Like, I dare anyone and on go to all 50 states and find the most proud, like just the concentration and just number of people that are that proud. You know, I would say I'm like a pretty proud, you know, being from Minnesota, but I won't have a Minnesota flag in my room or on my car or anything.
Lone
Texans
Star
will.
State.
Texans will everywhere. I mean, they'll put a bumper sticker, they'll put a flag in their room. They have the Lone Star on government infrastructure, like the columns for highways and such. Star, 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 star. Every column has a star. Shape of the state. You go to. I remember I went to the state fair, Texas State Fair, when I lived there. They had a huge Ferris wheel that was just all the Texas colors, Texas across it, Lone Star. Minnesota State Fair is just, you don't see the word Minnesota unless you're at the front gate or something. You just, it's a very, very proud. I mean, shirts, apparel.
It's a brand. I mean, Texas is a brand that the people there are very proud of. I'm a little concerned though, because there's a big influx of the Californians coming in, and
yeah, that's the problem.
That is the problem.
Austin has become a progressive cesspool,
right?
And then of course Dallas is kind of that next big city that could, you know, fall. So there's definitely that. I don't know what the Texans are doing about it.
This is probably loading up on guns and ammunition.
Yeah.
But I mean, how is that different from any other day in Texas, right?
Yeah. Jeez, yeah. But anyways, so what were you up to, Brooke?
yes, back to my exploits. But I definitely missed the couple of weeks when you were out, and congratulations on the new job again.
Yep.
And with that, I actually recently did a trip as well. Around the same time you were traveling, I made a trip back to Trinidad and Tobago, which for those who might be joining us for the first time, that is actually my home country. I've been out here for about 2.5 years, and I try to make the trip back at least once a year to see my mother, who's still out there. I've got a lot of friends, family, not too much family, but a couple cousins and stuff like that are out there. And so I made that trip. I didn't make it too public because if anybody's read any of the comments on my YouTube, especially with videos concerning Trinidad and Tobago, there's not exactly a lot of love, if you understand what I'm saying. There tends to be a lot of, we wish you get hit with a garbage truck kind of thing, like, don't ever come back to this country, that sort of thing. So I kept it kind of low key. I didn't do a video about it. I'll do one now that I'm back safely in the UK. But yes, I went out there, and I mean, I had a great time. It was only for 10 days. And the first day, of course, I came in like 5 p.m. So it was kind of a wasted day, just to get to the Airbnb and get some sleep. But yeah, I try to see my mom every day. She wasn't too far from where I'm at. In a kind of weird rise of capitalism in Trinidad and Tobago, we recently lost Uber, right? Uber, the ride sharing company. They operated in Trinidad for a couple of years, and because of government legislation, they basically pushed them out and they closed up their shop a couple months ago.
Jeez.
Yeah. So, state intervention. But this is what the country does. The country takes any kind of industry that's not oil and gas and shoots it through the head. So, for instance, Tobago is a fantastic tourist destination. So this is the second island of the two. And it's one of the few countries in the Caribbean that does not have like an all-inclusive resort, like a Sandals or I don't know any of the other brands. And the government was actually going to try and get one of these big tourist hotspot hotels to come and build in the country. And because of the back and forth, the he and haw, the politics and all that kind of stuff, Sandals basically said, well, fuck off. We're not going to deal with you anymore, right? And this is kind of how the government doesn't understand business, and they tend to fuck up pretty much everything that that isn't oil and gas. Even that they've kind of screwed up as well. But from the demise of Uber, actually 2 private companies in the country have taken up basically the infrastructure. So I think it was Rideshare TT or TT Rideshare or something like that. That was one of them, and then another one was called Drop. And they've basically kind of just taken over. They filled the gap for this whole thing. So thank God for that, because otherwise I would have had a really hard time getting around the country. I was using that service right through, full marks to every person that I got a ride from and stuff like that. I mean, my days were so full. There were times that I would go to from one end of the island to the other. So like from the north to the south. And I would have like 4 stops on the way to my destination, just visiting friends and family. So I left the capital city, which is Port of Spain, and I ended up in Chaguanas to meet one friend. And I think his mom was there and stuff like that. So I stopped to say hi. Then I went to another stop in a place called Freeport, and that's where I met Terrence, of whom you know you've had some dealings with my friend Terrence. And then I went from there, and I went and I met with a guy called Dexter. You know Dexter as well. You wrote for ChristiansTT.com. Dexter, he's doing my hosting, and we had a discussion about my website and redoing it and trying to take the whole social media thing and the blogging a little more seriously. And then I went to see my cousins, who, you know, they're getting married. Sorry, not my cousins, but my cousin is engaged to this gentleman, and he's involved in building a container home. So it's, you know, those big steel shipping containers. They basically got 3 of them joined together to make like a 2-bedroom, 2-bath ensuite living space, and with a nice veranda and all this other kind of stuff. So, I mean, that was kind of my days. My days, every day I was going somewhere. I was all over the country, Arima, Kamuto, just everywhere. And as I say, it was a very good time. I put on about 10 pounds because of all the food everybody was feeding me and all the rum and Coke I was drinking. So the diet went to shit for sure. So I'm kind of glad to be back on that at the moment, because, you know, my clothes were getting a little tight.
I mean, at least you were keeping active, though, right?
Yeah. Well, you know, it's a busy place. You know, you gotta get out there sometimes. You know.
Yeah.
But it was a good time. Yeah. It was a good time. It definitely. There were a lot of people I wanted to see that I couldn't see. So I'll probably, you know, either on my next trip. They want me to come back in October to kind of review the situation with my mother. I'll see if I can manage that or not. But one thing I wanted to say on that, I came into the country with 2 other gentlemen from the UK. So we flew in with British Airways. It was almost a direct flight. It was from Gatwick to St. Lucia and St. Lucia to Trinidad. 11 hours. And I came down with these 2 gentlemen. I wouldn't say their name, but they're living up in Birmingham, I believe. And we all came in together. We were kind of talking about, you know, life in the UK, coming from Trinidad, all this stuff, all kind of stuff. They were very impressed with my accent. I guess the minute I got on the plane, it kind of kicked in really hard. And we were having our discussions, and we came in, and one guy turns to the other guy and he says, "It doesn't feel like home anymore." And ironically, that was exactly what I was feeling when I walked through the immigration department. It's like, this isn't home anymore. And I'm probably going to get a lot of shit for that because, you know, of course, Trinidadians, it's Trini to the bone and all this kind of patriotism. But that was actually the truth. And I think in my case, it makes a lot of sense because I really don't have any more family there. You know, I haven't seen a lot of my friends in years. You know, my life is in the UK now. You know, everything's kind of up here and stuff like that. But it was quite a surreal experience walking through those gates, and just like, I thought I was dreaming. I didn't actually think I was there. And that was a big part of it. That was a very big part of it. But glad to be back. Made it back safely. I actually had people quite worried that I wouldn't make it back for security reasons, and you know, the crime situation out there is pretty serious. So glad I made it back alive, and glad to be back on the show, Amos. It's about bloody time we got this thing going again.
Let's see here. Okay. Um, but yeah, a couple other things too that I've been doing during the interim. I mean, I'll continue to be doing is writing more articles for Think Liberty and Being Libertarian, which are pretty much the same website. I mean, the same group nowadays. I know people who've been following us know that we were with them for a bit there with the podcast, but I'm still writing for them. So if you guys go to Being Libertarian or Think Liberty, more Being Libertarian now, I'm putting out an article once every other week, once a week, usually on news pieces and such. But there is talk that we're going to be moving some articles into a more like a sort of a compilation format, which is pretty exciting. So definitely check those out. Think-liberty.com or beinglibertarian.com. Definitely check out what I've been posting there. Yeah,
you've been doing like the Chinese
yeah,
news
I mean,
and
any news regarding involving, I mean, most of Asia, but most of Asia is just China.
I mean, any views on the whole China using Google to advance their military technology?
I have not looked into that.
Because Google apparently has a very large AI facility in Beijing. And as you would know,
oh, that's good.
Yeah,
Jesus.
yeah, that's what we want to hear, right? But I mean, there's good reason for that, ironically, because China actually does have huge data pools that they need for the AI algorithms, right? So China already stockpiles massive amounts of
because we
data.
really want that AI to learn as much as it can.
Yeah. So I just wondered if you had any comments on that, but I guess you'll have to get back to us.
Yeah, China is doing all sorts of funny stuff. Which is kind of what I wanted to touch on a little bit, at least today. Anyone who's pretty much been following the Twitter sphere as well as the excuse me, as well as just the the running gag with the Democrats now is everyone wants to run for president, and all the presidential candidates are bending over backwards doing all sorts of crazy nonsense or just funny nonsense to kind of like, hey, look at me. I'm the more relatable candidate. No, I'm the more relatable candidate. No, I'm the more relevant candidate. Look at me. I drink alcohol. Look at me. I eat real food.
That's crazy. And of course, you're talking about Pocahontas.
No. She drank a bear. Like, I'm gonna
Let me get a beer.
Get me a beer. It wasn't I'm gonna get a beer. I'm gonna get me a beer. Beto O'Rourke was taking pictures of himself eating at all these like Midwest restaurants. So Culver's, which is a place very popular here in the Midwest, he's got a picture of himself eating, kind of just, kind of like trying to play off the candid photo me eating at a place typically middle class people eat at. It's like, Jesus, like what the hell? Pick videos of him and another candidate were like lifting weights, trying to get in shape, and I'm like, what the fuck is going on here?
Swole is the goal.
yeah. No, not even that. It's just like, I mean, he's just sitting there with like 15-pound dumbbells, just kind of like, but I'm a real,
bro, do you even lift?
Exactly. I mean, there's the popular thing now is Democrats standing on tables in restaurants talking to people. Did you see that?
I haven't.
They're all like, look up all the like a lot of the candidates. A handful of them are like posting pictures. I was speaking at this place, and they're standing on a table.
Okay.
Like just, and then there was like a handful of candidates all standing on tables in like restaurants talking to people. Like, is this the thing now? But yeah. But one very interesting candidate that the media unfortunately hasn't covered as much, which is going to come back and bite them, is Andrew Yang, or as everyone is, hashtag Yang Gang, is a candidate that is a Taiwanese guy. Basically, I think he's a so his parents came to the U.S. and he grew up here, but he's very close to his Taiwan, background, and I'll get into why I think he's an absolute traitor to Taiwan.
I mean, this is the second time we've discussed him because we did have a whole podcast about him early on.
Well, with Kirk, I know we touched on him, but
we did a Yang thing because we have a whole episode where we basically discussed it.
Oh, right. But I want to just rant about him again.
Yeah. Let's do it. Because he's getting there.
Yeah, he's definitely getting there. So he's definitely getting really popular. His ideas on UBI and just the way he sort of tackled talking about the issues has had a wider appeal. It has tapped into the likes of the MAGA, basically the Make America Great Again group with Trump supporters who are starting to kind of see Trump as not as America first as maybe everyone likes him to be. The leftists that are kind of seeing, at least, not just another Bernie guy, but a guy with a little more energy. I mean, what's come out of his campaign is basically meme lords being paid $40 an hour to make Yang Gang memes.
Right.
Like the guy is actually tapping into a proper amount of the meme world where he's getting, his popularity is gaining traction in the internet. He kind of played a little joke on, so UBI is his version of the freedom dividend, $1,000 a month for every American over 18. He did a little video saying, 1,000 good boys a month. And it's a video of him with a dog. Really? But it's genuinely candid. It's not manufactured anyway. It's not, oh, look at me, so relatable. Like it's just he's playing the memes.
Right.
And so excuse me. And I mean, to get in granted, also his identity politics is being played right too. As much as we can sit here and say identity politics is a bunch of BS, he's actually playing it in a way to appeal to almost all of the races. He's obviously being a Democrat, and UBI is a big old thing that in Medicare for all. So that's playing to the marginalized in our society, and it can play to the minorities or the other ethnic groups in the country that maybe aren't as financially successful. So that gets them. But because UBI is a blanket policy, the guy also has is not like the rest of the left, basically hating white people.
Right.
So you have white people that like him. I mean, you have people, I think Richard Spencer actually liked him. Not that really says anything about, it's just because he's a little more inclusive. And you're getting a little bit of the libertarian group, which is giving me a whole new perspective on. So you remember our friend Eric Laprice that we had on. He considers himself sort of like an anarchist, but also collapsitarian, sort of like seeing that collapse is imminent.
Yes.
Well, a lot of the mainly a lot of like your libertarians that are kind of ironically jumping on the Yang Gang bandwagon in a push for accelerationism, which is basically collapsitarian, but speeding it up.
Right.
Because they're seeing as the collapse of the U.S. economy, they're seeing Andrew Yang as sort of like a perfect guy to just speed it right up into the ground.
So they're basically admitting that he's going to destroy the country.
That he very well could, yes.
Okay, right. Just making sure that's the platform.
Excuse me.
We're all talking about. Okay.
Yeah. So it's led to the accelerationism is what it's called. Is just speed it up. So you see a lot of like Granted, there are libertarians that I'm seeing that are giving a real breakdown of his policies. So our friends over at the Think Liberty podcast, they did a whole show about Andrew Yang, and they're kind of calling him a radical centrist because
Really?
he's actually touching on so many left and right leaning ideas
I
while
mean,
calling.
he's what are his right leaning ideas? I haven't seen any.
I mean, you got to look through a lot of his platform, but he does have some ideas that would be. I mean, he does want to like.
I mean, just to kind of touch on it. All right, so he was the UBI guy, so that's Universal Basic Income. He's also for Medicare for All.
Yeah.
So he also did the human-centered capitalism, which was basically socialism. He wants to,
that's his three big ones, but he has a lot of little things that are touching on trying to. I forgot exactly what it was. I mean, he's somehow he's had an appeal with a lot of libertarians, which I find very interesting, like both ironically and unironically.
Okay. I don't know his full platform. I'd have
to look more into it as well.
But
there is one really interesting piece he has in his policy, which I told you about.
Yes.
So if you guys if you go to Andrew Yang's website, and you look in his policies, there's one called Modernize Military Spending. Right. And when you skim through that, it talks about, cyber terrorism and such. He wants to modernize our military. He wants to bring it up to the times. Like we would actually have, a real dedicated cyber terrorism unit that would be more up to speed with things. He wants to basically dial back a lot of our more physical assets. He wants to be ahead of the game with nuclear materials that are floating around in the world. Right. Try to keep those in our hands so it doesn't, so we don't have any risks. But one thing very interesting is he wants to bring in rechannel a portion of the budget to create a brand new department called the Legion of Builders and Destroyers.
Right. This is not a comic book thing, right? This is a Marvel DC, right? So it's not like the Legion of Doom, right?
Exactly. That'd be DC for anyone who's wondering. The Legion of Doom was basically the anti-Justice League. It was Lex Luthor and all those other guys. So yeah, he called it the Legion of Builders and Destroyers. It is a government-run organization with a commander. So the commander of the Legion of Doom. The Legion of Doom. No,
they better and better.
So the commander can basically order in cities where problems of derelict buildings, or what they call urban blight, where buildings are just, because you get cities where you get just whole areas of abandoned buildings, where they could basically go in there, completely overrule any local regulations or ordinances, tear it down, and build. It's basically like a weeding out an agency that'll weed out buildings that have no use to a city. But the fact that as they see fit, quote unquote, can go in there and overrule all local ordinances and regulations to just tear down buildings.
Eminent domain on steroids. Yeah.
It's literally it's a department. It's the Department of Eminent Domain. Might as well just call it that.
The Federal Department of Eminent Domain.
I mean, that's actually happened. I mean, I've seen eminent domain in my hometown here in Minnesota, where there was a building that I grew up seeing all the time, and it was a cafe there, and people were like, "Yeah, I always, it was a it was a welcomed place. People went there all the time. There was this cafe. They said, yeah, I always went to that cafe after church, and I loved it there." Yeah. And they in a rare thing, you know, a teacher actually explained to us, yeah, eminent domain. Look at that part there. That was eminent domain. And people and the
Well,
kid.
so what happened to the cafe? They just
It was an old building. It was one of the older buildings in the town,
Mhm.
and it was completely torn down. And they put in a sort of modern, sort of mini strip mall kind of thing.
Okay.
So there's like a gym there. There's an optometrist. There was a drugstore, which then got shut down, turned into sort of like a high middle class restaurant, like a
Right.
cuisine
Right.
place, which is actually nice. I mean, it kind of they're kind of trying to have a little, you know, little culture kind of brought in, like a high society kind of thing in there, just a little bit,
Right.
to kind of bring in the sort of the higher value residents,
I
kind
mean
of bring it.
that is the flaw of eminent domain, right? If it is you have an established business that's running and stuff like that, and it's paying whatever form of taxes. Eminent domain says, well, if we replace this with more stores or more boutiques, they'll pay higher taxes. And you know, your property rights basically mean nothing. There's always something that will pay higher taxes that you know will basically squeeze out your property rights. That is the you know the fundamental flaw. And unfortunately, sometimes those properties do get seized, and then those projects get defunded, and people lose their property for nothing. So it's a tough one. And he wants to have like a national federal agency to do this. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's. I mean, I'm on his website right now. Actually,
problematic.
problematic. Yeah, it might trigger some people. Um, I think the only thing I could kind of spot just off the top of my head for uh, somewhat libertarian, right leaning suggestions would probably be his foreign policy, which is less wars. It appears that way. Legalization of cannabis, obviously, legalization of marijuana is a big thing. The voting thing is interesting. He says we should implement voting even via smartphones using the blockchain. Not exactly sure how that will work, but okay, you know, it's possible. But then there's a lot of stuff here. Okay, so make community college affordable. So that's college free tuition or close to free tuition for all. That's very left. Yeah, I'm not, and well, he seems to support nuclear power, which is a good thing. Yeah, he wants to bring about some kind of revival with nuclear power. So I think that's kind of it, you know, in terms of on the right. Everything else here is like super left, and as you say, very collapsitarian in nature, you know.
Well, yeah, accelerating towards the collapse. So, and I mean, I wonder, you know, if you put Ocasio Cortez and him side by side with their spending policies, who would outdo the other?
I think they're close. I think they're
Yeah,
close.
yeah.
Now, I have a question for you because the Asian capitalists, our friends Bill and Jeff, they commented on the fact that he was Asian and how they kind of tribalized his candidacy and being like, "Hey, look, this is our guy," to the point where they're kind of saying, "Well, you know, if we support him, we get 1,000, you know, US a month or whatever the case is."
Or as they're calling it, the bags. Get your bags of money.
Yeah, right.
Gotta get those
Um,
bags, man.
I mean, yeah. So, and they kind of said that because he was Asian, they gave him a pass. So, Amos, are you giving him a pass because he's
No,
not only Asian,
no,
he is from Taiwan?
no,
No. Are you sure?
no.
Okay,
Fuck this
and
guy.
why? Fuck this guy.
Seriously, I mean, I like. Okay, serious moment for a sec. I
Sure.
like what he's doing. I mean, what he represents is definitely important, and it makes sense. You know,
What is that exactly? What does he represent?
I mean, he's basically um, he is the anti-Trump Trump. He is the so unorthodox. He is an unorthodox candidate in a lot of ways, just because he has a lot of policies that seem very typical, but he's also just very unorthodox in the way that he's going about his candidacy and how he's gaining attention.
Right.
I mean, the news isn't really taking him seriously, but people are. I mean, he's getting out there and people are hearing about it. I mean, no one took Trump seriously, and look what happened there.
There's a difference because there was an anti-Trump Trump in the Republican kind of sphere during the 2016 election, and it was Ben Carson, right? He was the complete opposite of what Trump was, right?
Here's another thing too: is they're having a proper, I think, a real sort of, I don't know, something about him is just very interesting. That I think people are jumping on liking him because he's sort of this different taste of the Democrats. Like, so Trump was the Republican, we know that, but he wasn't quite a Republican.
Yeah, he's not a full blown Republican. I'll grant that.
Yang, the way he's playing his cards, is not typical Democrat.
Okay.
He's not playing the identity politics in a typical Democratic way.
Well, he can't.
What do you mean he can't?
He's Asian.
Well, so he has that. Full disclosure, if he wins and we get UBI, I'm taking the money. I don't care.
Yeah, you have a moral responsibility to take back as much money the government steals from you as possible. I'm totally for that.
I shared, the meme with you where it's like, when you're spending your Yang money and buying all your guns, and then they come and confiscate your guns, and you're like, today's the day.
It's going down. The revolution will be televised.
Exactly. It's just like, yeah. I mean, anyways.
Okay. Well, you say that, then I'll tell you what I think is going to happen.
So, what I don't like is the fact that he's Taiwanese. I actually don't like that he is, because of his policies.
Right.
Because he has some real hard, like, commie policies. And the spirit of being Taiwanese, I believe, is to not be a communist.
Was he born in Taiwan? Or is he just descent?
No. He's just the first generation born here.
Right. So
his parents were born there. He's born here.
Right. So
yeah, he couldn't be president if that was the case.
Good point. So he can't be. Yeah, you could be possibly dual citizen, because Ted Cruz ran and he was Canadian,
but not a natural born citizen. You have to be a natural born citizen, or if he was born on a U.S. base in Taiwan, which I don't think there's a case of that for that.
Okay. Yeah, well, McCain was born in Mexico in a U.S. base, so that's the precedent.
Yeah, if you're born on a U.S. base, that counts. But
okay.
Anyway, so I mean, I've said this before and I'll say it again. I find him to be a commie Taiwanese traitor. No,
that's not what you said in the first podcast, though, Amos.
Because I fully thought about it more, and the more I heard about his policies and such, and how he's just, yeah. I mean, he's kind of like, I've heard him on Joe Rogan, and he's criticized a lot of things. He's talked about a lot of issues, and he has good points. Like, I will give the credit that the guy knows things. The guy is smart. The guy is playing his cards really well. But as a Taiwanese person to another Taiwanese guy,
fuck you,
fucking traitor. I mean, I've started to really think about like my views on things, and if people ask me like, yeah, I'm a libertarian, but I consider myself like a patriotic American libertarian with Taiwanese nationalistic views. Like, when it comes to national issues, I'm partial to Taiwan in a lot of ways.
Sure.
Like, if it's involving Taiwan, I tend to be partial to Taiwan. If it's involving the U.S., I'm partial to the U.S.
Sure. I could respect that.
I'm not playing, I'm definitely not for wars. I'm definitely not for, in a case where Taiwan and America are involved, like with these trade wars this trade war that's going on, Taiwan's kind of caught in the middle. I'm kind of like, hey, help. I'm thinking Taiwan is like reaching out to America, like, help a brother out, like. I've been writing on some of these things, and it's definitely a tricky thing that Trump has caught himself into, because I see he does want to sort of help Taiwan, so to speak, but because of the because of China, it's tough that you don't want to show too much favoritism or partiality to Taiwan.
Yeah, I mean the Taiwan situation is definitely unique, to say the least.
Well, it's been so we'll touch on this then real quick.
This
It's
is
just
like the second time in 2 podcasts that we're going into Taiwanese politics.
hey,
we did this with Kirk.
but I mean, well, I wrote the article talking about how back in January, Xi Jinping basically talked about like basically was renewing his strong stance as
The one China policy.
Yeah, I mean, he's like, we're the rogue, Taiwan. I'm saying we, but Taiwan is the rogue province. He's pushing for peaceful, quote unquote, peaceful reunification, while the military, the People's Army, I forget, People's Liberation Army, China's army, China's army
Liberation Army, PLA.
Yeah, is posting propaganda videos, singing songs of friends getting back together while showing fighter jets in the sky with a backdrop of like Taiwan fields, and I'm like, what the fuck is going on? and so Taiwan puts out a video on their Facebook for their military of like a readiness video, like, here at the Taiwan military, we are ready 24/7. And I'm like, oh my god.
Yeah. I mean, you like most people would know what that is. Like that is Cold War style propaganda pieces that the West has
through social media, and it's like, what the hell are you guys doing? Like everyone sees this.
The West doesn't know about that, at least since the collapse of the Berlin Wall. So this is like a reality between China and Taiwan.
And this is a reality when I lived there. 12 years, no. 10, 12 years ago. Yeah, I mean, I was there, and growing up, it was like, like as I've said this before on the podcast, English news station, yeah, so the Taiwanese intelligence reports basically have concluded that there's 500 ballistic missiles that are aimed at the island of Taiwan, ready to fire at any moment. And I was like, what? Air raid drills where they play soundtracks of planes bombing your school, and you're in the basement kind of covering your eyes and ears, hopefully not dying.
I mean, did you I'm going to ask if you wrote about this, that Google Maps revealed Taiwan's best kept military defense secrets in some Google Earth scan. Did you touch on that?
Well, Google Earth scans everything though.
Yeah, but there's a block, all right, on certain, like, you can't see Area 51, for instance. It's kind of blurred out in Nevada, and apparently they apparently captured some anti-ballistic missiles showing like U.S. whatever Patriot missiles, whatever fucking missiles it was.
Oh yeah, I mean it's a well-known thing,
but it revealed the location is what I was saying. Yeah, that was the problem. Like, oops. Yeah, good job, Google. How's that Beijing office working out for you?
Exactly. I mean, it was also, we're at home. Granted, my family and I, we lived in when we were in Taiwan, we lived in some of the mountains. So if whatever happened, we had a little bit of a distance from things. But my dad would be reading articles on the internet. Hey, here's this article talking about when an invasion could happen. What?
Yeah.
I mean, this is back then, so we're like, yeah, it could happen after 2008 when the Beijing Olympics happened, or it could happen here after this happened, or it could happen there after that happened, and we're like,
and what do you think? Do you think the invasion is coming?
The world is watching China way too closely. As much as like you're saying, like the West doesn't understand the situation.
Yeah,
China has the spotlight because thanks to the internet.
Right. Yeah, they can't keep the news out.
The world is being watched by the world.
Yeah.
And so there's not much, we can really do. I mean, how much more has the average American citizen known about like someone, known about places like North Korea in the last decade?
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
we're so overly informed on some things while being very underinformed on other things. But if anything happens, the world knows.
I think it's a tough one. Like we've seen occupation before, right? Well, of the world famous Israel Palestine is obviously a big one. We're not going to touch that. Russia annexed Crimea in Ukraine after they voted for secession from Ukraine to join with the Russians and stuff like that. And the Russians were hit with all types of sanctions that I believe they're still under to this day. And I think if China were to make a move on Taiwan, on what was basically like a democratic, even though nobody could admit it publicly, it's considered like a democratic, independent country. I think there would be a lot of outcry, but I'm not sure what anybody would do. Like the US will put sanctions, but they're doing that already. Possibly you'll get some people in Europe doing that as well. Sanctions definitely hurt China more than it hurts the US. The US is being hit, but China's an export economy, right? It's manufacturing. So putting tariffs on everything they export is really crippling their economy. But the flip side of that is all of the rare earth metals that we need for our tech comes from fucking China. Right? If China really wanted to screw the world, they could. In one swipe of the pen, they could like double the price of every iPhone on the planet. So it's a really, if something did happen, I'm not sure what people could actually do to like pressure China to do anything.
Yeah, that's a problem.
Yeah, that's some real black pill kind of knowledge. And we just got flagged. This video is going down. No comments are going to be permitted.
I'm never getting monetized at this rate.
Yeah. This is a 30-day suspension is coming. And
no, but yeah, I mean, and that's what's so interesting is when we talk about this, it's all brand new stuff for a lot of people. Not a lot of people really follow it. So if anything happens, I think the world will know. But but will the world do anything? It's tough to say.
It's like, well, it's not really the same, but the world is now very informed of the situation in Venezuela, right? I think even you must have seen feeds coming through on your social media about what's going on in Venezuela, right? And Trump, not Trump specifically, but Pence has brought it to the fore, talking about the illegitimacy of Maduro and the Juan Guaidó. They've appointed him as the interim prime minister. And I've been talking about the situation in Venezuela for over a decade, right? And it's all been controlled. It's all been silenced on social media and stuff like that. Now it's kind of spilled over to the point where it can no longer be ignored. So there's the spin brigade has come out, right? So people are trying to blame the US sanctions that only came into effect in 2014. They're trying to blame, covert CIA operatives destabilizing the country. Well, they didn't fucking destroy the property rights and, start printing money. That's a government policy. That's it. The news is out. Just like what's going on in South Africa with the white farmers. This information is getting out.
Yeah, I knew about the South Africa situation at least a good couple of years before the news really took it off.
As did I.
But the Taiwan situation is way longer than that.
It's a slow burn. Well, there isn't any
it's a slow burn with no real major developments. Like the actual problem between Taiwan and China has been going on for decades.
Correct.
But it's only till recently, like, oh, hey, there's an exclusive on CNN with the Taiwan president, and they're talking about how like she's lost all the support, when in reality, she's actually so Xi Jinping's kind of helped her because she's had such an anti-China sort of, like, not anti-China, but sort of a push against the idea of reunification and trying to like pressure China, like, we're not giving in to you.
Right.
We're us. We are the independent nation. And excuse me. And actually the KMT has actually been trying to sort of ease tensions trying to be more friendly.
What is
Which
the KMT? What's that?
the Nationalist Party.
Oh, in Taiwan.
Yeah, the KMT is short for the Kuomintang, which Chinese it just means the Nationalist Party.
Okay.
And it's weird, like the Nationalist Party now is very like trying to be friendly with China, while her party, which is the opposition, is very much against that. Which I can
Right.
see why. I mean, with Xi Jinping making the statements he's making, like peaceful reunification, and then the military playing their propaganda and all this stuff, it's like no, no, you're just not. Like that's just not cool. You're-
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, do
and
you still have family in Taiwan? Do they tell you what's going on?
not a political fan. I mean, so the anti-communist sentiments in Taiwan
The
reside.
Pinochet's.
Yeah, the reside with the elders in society. My grandmother, and which passed on to my mom, kind of, but me, like my generation in Taiwan, is pretty much the same as kind of what's going on here. Is this rising sort of? I mean, it's not like a pro-communist, but it's just with the influence of Western society and just the fact that people aren't reminded of what's of history.
Yeah.
It's kind of eased those sentiments. So now there's attitudes that are communism is bad, is kind of bad,
Kind of bad. I mean, I
but
was going to ask that. Is there like a pro-China party? Or
no,
like
no, that
there's
that
no
wouldn't have. No, that's
right.
see, that's. But it's like flirting with that line between anti and sort of okay with
Right. Right.
that you have those fringes that are kind of slipping through, like it's not that bad. They're just over there. We just got to trade with them, be cool with them. We're probably not going to reunify, but at least be cool. And then China comes around and says, "No, you're coming back." And then they're like, "Okay." They're kind of being a little bit of a pushover while the president is not.
Right. Right. And you were saying about this woman, how China has helped her. She's in the
By
opposition.
pushing, yeah, by pushing for reunification, by reaffirming their position that Taiwan is basically unacceptable to exist.
Right.
It has strengthened her to say like, "Hey, my intention, my attitudes towards China are well, warranted.
Right.
They're being a dick, and so I'm not looking like a dick for being against them wanting to have us back. We're not going back. We're a country. We are us.
Yes.
Like, without with the U.S. or not. Yeah, the U.S. sells Taiwan military assets. No nukes, but
Well,
yeah.
none that we know about.
Oh boy.
It's kind of like the Israel policy, right? Nobody confirms or denies if Israel has nuclear weapons. It's kind of
Oh, that'd
assumed.
be. I mean, freaking a one nuke would a good sized nuke would take out most of Taiwan.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, Israel would be the same thing, which is why the Iran wanted to get, you know, to kind of balance the score, sort of thing. But
And that's the thing too is so China is such an interesting thing outside of Taiwan because you don't really. I mean, granted, I don't know much about the Tibet situation, so you have the Tibet thing and maybe something there, but big beyond that, you start to see. I mean, now it's a balance of power in the whole region. China is starting to bolster their military forces to balance the power. The whole thing with trying to push to denuclearize North Korea. Kim Jong Un and Trump had their summit in Hanoi, Vietnam, which led to just then randomly some officials come out and say, you know, we're not going to suspend our nuclear program. And then they tried to uh, basically some of their facilities that were torn down, they started to rebuild a little bit.
Right.
Like, what? Like, what's going on there? So, it's a very it's all very interesting when you really get into it, but it's unfortunate not a lot of people are keeping up with it. Like, we'll all hear about North Korea because Trump's involved, but we're not
Yes.
realizing the big picture in that whole region. We have allies there. There's a couple of first world countries there that hold a lot of our Western values dear that we're not really talking about that could be affected by a stronger China and and a North Korea that isn't kept in check.
Right. I mean, you're talking about Japan, so
Yeah, Japan and South Korea.
and then the
And
whole
then
Pacific Rim, New
the
Zealand,
Pacific Rim.
Australia.
I mean, New Zealand and Australia aren't too involved. I mean, they got their own issues.
Right.
Which now we could talk. I don't know. Have you kept up at all with the information that's come out of that shooting in New Zealand?
I haven't seen anything recent. So I know that the mosque shooting took place, and straight up we condemn that kind of action on anybody. I've heard rumors, and this is what I said early on when I heard about it. I said I'm going to wait a couple of days to kind of wait for more information to come in before I really said anything or did anything regarding the incident. And we've learned a lot. It's not entirely clear all the details.
You heard about the manifesto?
Yeah, he had a manifesto, and basically the government is doing exactly what he wanted them to do, right? He wanted them to confiscate the guns.
Well, I mean, he did this whole thing to kind of
spark.
People to spark, but also, I mean, what he's written in is like a troll. Like, there's an actual passage in there where he says, like, the video game Spyro 3 made him a white supremacist.
Yeah, which is garbage.
He wrote something. He said he likes Trump, the symbol, but doesn't like Trump policies.
Yeah.
He praises communist China somehow. Just all sorts of stuff. So, I mean, what he meant to do, what he was really trying to change the conversation, the narrative.
Correct.
And guess what's happening in New Zealand?
They're trying to confiscate the semi-automatic weapons.
What's her name? Ardern, the Prime Minister Ardern, basically, she's called Parliament to implement legislation. Hopefully, they're saying by April 11th.
Right.
To create a semi-automatic ban that will have a grace period where you can sell your weapons back. It will cost anywhere between 70 to 140 million US dollars. So about, they said 100 to 200 million Australian dollars to buy back, which is a lot of money, but it's the price. She literally said word for word, the price we're paying for safety.
Right.
They even, I mean, the police minister said it was which is very different from us, which I might, just to be clear. The right to bear firearms is a privilege, not a right.
Not in New Zealand.
In New Zealand, it is a privilege, not a right. For us,
Correct.
It is a right. They said they will allow shotguns and 22 caliber rifles for farmers and hunters.
Right.
But anything else?
Not for self-defense. In fact, self-defense disqualifies you from getting a gun in New Zealand. To say that you want a gun it's the same in the UK.
Yeah, because Parliament is sovereign, right?
Because Parliament is sovereign. Ironically, New Zealand is one of the other few countries that doesn't have a written constitution. But it's not codified is the correct term. I was, I haven't read the full manifesto of this gentleman. I don't know what his whole thing was. There's a rumor, I don't know if it's true or not, that he apparently became radicalized on a trip to Paris, France. And he basically saw the effects of the mass immigration kind of, destroying, the social cohesion of Paris. Now, I haven't been to Paris, so I haven't experienced any of this. And in his frustration to try and vent concerns about these mass immigration policies, he got banned from whatever channel he was in, maybe 4chan or 8chan or one of these things. And again, this goes back to the fact that censorship and this crackdown on internet speech and free speech is really more responsible for breeding extremism than anything else.
Here's another thing too. I don't know if so. There's a meme going around, which rightly so. It's criticizing what's wrong with New Zealand's censorship problem. So there was a video that was circulated on social media of the shooting, supposedly
on Facebook Live.
Yeah. He was streaming a video where he was in a car playing some sort of music and just shooting up places, and some clips showed like actual carnage that he was doing. And
yes,
the circulation of this video has so Facebook's obviously taking it down. Try any instance where it could be coming up, the algorithms will take it down. Okay,
right.
like that's I get that. It's a very disturbing video. But in New Zealand, circulating the video or watching the video is punishable by up to 14 years in jail.
Wow.
You know what the laws are on the books are for pedophilia?
What are the laws on the books in New Zealand for pedophilia?
10 years in jail. So it is criminally worse to share a video. Granted, a disturbing video, but nonetheless, it is just a video.
Yeah.
It is worse to share a video than it is by jail sentences that you possibly get. It's worse to share a video of a shooting than it is to rape a kid.
Yeah. That is
good job, New Zealand.
Yeah. The New Zealand prime minister is ridiculously left, right? She's like hardcore progressive. And this is how progressives deal with the world. They basically stick their head in the sand and they try to, censor and get rid of everything they don't like. As we know, the regressive left can't argue. It's all about the feelings. And worse, when they got government power, this is how they respond. And I have to give it props to Matt Christensen. So he did a video about the same incident. And he said that he watched the video. I haven't seen the video. I'm not really interested. But he said he wanted to see it to see just what we're up against. Like, he wanted to see the level of carnage and atrocity that people were capable of. And to the best of my knowledge, this is the only first-person account of any kind of mass shooting. We've never seen that before, not in real life anyway. But yeah, it goes back to this point about if you have issues in a society and you remove the one vent that people can use to express their opinions and their concerns about whatever issue it is in society, which is free speech, the last resort is violence, because that's all that's left.
Well, yeah. Martin Luther King Jr. Violence is the language of the unheard.
Exactly. If you're not giving people the right to speak and you're shutting down and deplatforming them, I mean, we just had Jordan Peterson has been banned from, I think, Cambridge School of Divinity. They invited him for a speech.
His book was taken off the shelves in New Zealand.
Yeah, for whatever reason, like there's some kind of connection between Jordan Peterson or anybody else. But I mean, this again, there are a bunch of leftist regressive children who don't know how to handle or think, rationally about things that are running the show, right? It's a bunch of fucking baboons, right? And they're not making things any better. In fact, they're making things worse, to the point where, yes, if you don't give people the opportunity to speak and discuss and argue online and disagree and call each other names and get that frustration out, it will result in violence.
Do you know what the real problem was? I mean, there's obviously many problems.
Lots of problems, but yes.
36 minutes for the police to respond.
That's not, I mean, that's terrible, but that's not uncommon. Wasn't there some
police? Gun control's the problem, guys. Come on, we got to take those guns away.
Right. Instead of dealing with the issue of security, like every other institution, we know how to protect. Banks know how to protect what's inside. Everything. You got security. You got all these other kinds of things, and it's unfortunate that we've given up the rights to self-defense and we've handed it over to the state, which has shown itself completely incapable of keeping people safe. As you say, it took 30 minutes. I think there was a report in the UK when one of these trucks of peace ran into like the pedestrians outside Parliament building. The chief of police locked himself in a car while people were being run over next to him, and he just stayed there. Right? He did not even do what he was called to do, which was to protect and serve. And then there was another video.
Say what you want to say about American cops and police brutality.
Yeah,
our cops would die in the.
Yeah, no, I give props to the. Well, I mean, obviously not all, but the U.S. forces are actual forces. The police and the Met out here, they're quick to come and arrest you for tweets. But you actually have like an actual crime going on. Well, not so much, right? I'm not putting my neck out for that. And in fact, there was a video of a bunch of like I don't know, hooligans, kids or whatever, beating the shit out of a police officer, and nobody stopped to help him, right? And the commissioner again came up and be like, well, if you see the police in a situation like that, the public really should come to assist. And Nigel Farage actually spoke up and said, why in God's name would we do that? Because then we'd be arrested for assault and battery. Because that's what happens. Anytime you try to actually defend anybody, because we've taken that right away from the people, you get charged. And we saw that where this elderly gentleman was, somebody broke into his house and he ended up shooting the guy in self-defense. He got arrested and he got questioned. And this is the level of insanity where the state has become incapable of protecting people. They've taken away our rights to protect ourselves. They're taking away our avenues to discuss these issues like rational adults because, feels. It's going to come to a head. And not that I want that. I want people to discuss. I want people to have the dialogue and vent with words and battle ideas. But if we silence that and we keep with these ridiculous, policies, it's gonna overflow somewhere. It's gonna find expression somewhere, and it's going to be violence, and that actually quite terrifies me.
Yeah.
I mean, it's bad, man. It's really bad. And with this I don't know what his name is. I don't know why I'm calling him a gentleman, but this guy in New Zealand, and again, because it's a very progressive prime minister, she doesn't know what to do. She's just trying to do something. I think they did the buyback program and like 16 guns were returned out of however many thousands. So nobody's really taking this seriously in New Zealand, right?
So yeah, the fine I think is 4,000 Australian dollars.
Well, New Zealand dollars.
New Zealand, did I say New Zealand? Oh, New Zealand
Australian. Yeah.
Same country. No, people get mad if I say that.
Yeah, we got a Kiwi that's mad enough, so we don't need to push him any further.
And
I mean, just thank God you
4 years in jail.
4 years in jail for sharing a video.
No, for the gun. Sorry for the guns.
Oh,
the video was 14 years.
14 years, right.
So it's worse to share a video than have a gun.
And I mean that solves absolutely nothing. Right? It solves nothing. Yeah. I mean, you think about this, right? In fact, somebody I was listening to recently was making this point. It was Sargon of Akkad talking with the character out here of Tommy Robinson. And Tommy Robinson is a very active political figure out here in the UK, very controversial. You've kind of listened and heard some of his stuff. I'm not the biggest supporter of Tommy Robinson. I understand what he's trying to do, and I think to a great extent, he's been maligned and misrepresented. I don't agree with everything. But they made the point that Adolf Hitler has more of an online presence of the internet than the likes of Tommy Lee and Alex Jones. Like, you can get catalogs of literal Nazi speeches spoken of by Adolf Hitler, but you can't go on YouTube and find Alex Jones videos, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, and then of course, so yeah, there was that whole thing with the Jordan Peterson thing. His books were taken off the shelves of this major book company. I don't know, some kind of like a
What
Barnes and Noble of
of
New
New
Zealand.
Zealand, right?
And his books were taken off the shelf. But guess what's still on the shelf, everyone?
You could get
Mein
Mein
Kampf.
Kampf. I mean, this is insanity. This is absolute insanity. These people just have no concept of reality whatsoever. I mean, I'm kind of with the collapsitarian black pill people that if these people stay in power, it really is. I'm sure the Russians or somebody or the Chinese are looking at this nonsense going on in the West and be like, yeah, we could take them because there's
Oh
no
yeah.
way the Chinese are not buying this garbage. The Russians are definitely not buying this garbage.
I'll have to tell you a little bit about what I heard about China and their some Chinese thoughts on the shooting off the air because it's pretty interesting. But it's a little
Too
too
racy,
edgy.
too edgy for iTunes.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I mean, we've covered the gauntlet, right? Hitler, Mein Kampf, right? The Russians, Chinese, communism. Yeah, this will probably get pulled from iTunes very shortly.
But anything else you want to touch on quick before we get out of here?
No. Are we good on time? How are we doing on time?
Really good on time. We're actually a little over, but it's fine.
Yeah, no, I'm good. I'm glad to be back on the show, Amos. I'm glad you're back. Like the glasses for those who are listening, both Amos and myself are wearing our glasses for this round.
Yeah. We will be back on Sunday, for sure, at 11 o'clock Central time. No, actually, wait, noon Central, because of the daylight savings and those darn Brits over there don't believe in, conserving candles.
We do have daylight savings just a couple of days or weeks after you, I think. So there'll be a little gap for a while.
Yeah. So we'll be doing it on noon Central time on Sunday. Again, a live show. We're just kind of doubling up to make sure we get a lot of content out for everyone to watch. But thank you everyone for joining us. This again was the 44th episode. Basically just us coming back, doing a little recap, touch on some news. But check us out on iTunes. Just like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Of course, follow both of us on social media. Brook_Potter and Amos Joe, both on Twitter, right?
Yes.
Okay. And of course, check out our Subscribe Star and our Patreon if you do like the show and would love to pledge a monthly supporting amount. Yeah. And thank you everyone for joining us. We will see you on Sunday.
Thanks for watching, guys.